All right, amazing. So I just want to welcome everyone right off the hop right now to this live, where I'm going to be covering how anxiety turns to panic. And the reason why I'm doing this live is because there are so many of you in the group that are working with this overlap between anxiety and panic. Some people are having panic out of nowhere and like I've never dealt with it before. So we're going to be covering all these things. And I've written some topics down that you guys have talked about in the group and asked me questions about in the DMs. So we're going to cover it all. If any questions come up during this conversation, just throw them in the chat. It is going to be a free flow because I do want to have that live Q&A component because I know everyone has very specific things that they're working through in regard to panic. But yeah, so let's just get going here, okay? The first thing I want to say is there is a very big difference between an anxiety attack, which technically doesn't even belong in the DSM-5, so we are going to treat it as such. And then we have panic attacks, which are, we'll get there, but it is truly a disorder, right? And we have disorder of the brain, disorder of the body, and we'll cover all that good stuff. But there is a very big difference between the two. And we're going to talk about the symptoms of when anxiety becomes panic, because it's not like, and we will talk about this with a picture of the brain here, it's not like anxiety just becomes panic if you don't work on your anxiety, right? There has to be a tick in the nervous system that allows for that to happen. So for anxiety symptom-wise, and let's call it life picture wise, what we're looking at is the symptoms of a speedy heart. We're having shortness of breath. We're having queasiness in the stomach. We're feeling unsettled. We're irritable. Those are like the basics, right? And then when we're looking at panic, this enters a new territory of something that almost feels, and if those of you in here have had panic attacks, it feels like you are in fact dying, right? There's that sense of, this is the end of my life. There's a feeling of doom. It's not just a high heart rate and high blood pressure. There's actual visual distortions, sound distortions. We are having out of body experiences, our skin feeling different, our temperature being completely dysregulated. And you in that moment are not actually in control, right? So that's the big difference where when I hear people say like, yeah, I get panic attacks, I'm like, okay, what does a panic attack look like to you? Because there's no such thing as like a chill panic attack or like a half-ass panic attack. We are all the way through the roof, out of body experience, unable to bring ourselves back to a place of grounding, correct? So if you do experience panic, I want to hear from you right now in the chat. Just let me know. Do you actually think when I describe it that way, that the panic is what you're going through? Or does it feel more like an anxiety attack, which is I feel overwhelmed, I feel anxious, I can't get control of my thoughts, I feel like I could be sweating and my heart's racing, but there's not the out of body experience, doom, gloom, this is the end of my life, it is a medical emergency, someone please help me. I do want to hear from you right now, okay? So that is putting that line between what anxiety is versus what panic is. And now we're going to look at the brain right now because I have it on the screen for you. So what we have here is the prefrontal cortex, which is the lovely part of our brain that makes us a human being, right? That's great. We love that. It helps us think. It helps us do things. It allows us to go to work and do high functioning stuff instead of being like a monkey and scratching your armpits all day, right? So we love the frontal cortex because it makes us a functioning species. But holy shit, is it responsible for so much anxiety, right? Because that part of our brain was created to have that higher level of thinking, but it was not prepared for everything that the human being was going to become, okay? So we have that frontal cortex. Then we have this little ball right in the middle. Can you see my mouse if I circle it? We have amygdala with an arrow. It's pointing to it. There you go. You can see it, right? There's a very, very tiny part of your brain. And this is a primal part of your brain. And it has all to do with your fear response and your emotions and all of the things that we think are our human thinking brain. But this part is actually very animalistic, okay? This has actually been conserved over so many different species types. We all have this little amygdala that is causing our body to feel things like fight or flight or freeze. And as humans like to say now, fawn, which we don't even need to get into that today. But what's happening between these two parts of the brain is the prefrontal cortex is thinking, and it has a few connections with the amygdala, right? So the prefrontal cortex is anxiety for all intents and purposes. Right now, we're going to talk about that. And the amygdala is going to be solely responsible for our panic, okay? So prefrontal cortex thinks. It sends some signals toward the amygdala, and then the amygdala will probably, maybe in some situations, freak out, okay? That's what causes our physical symptoms. If we're referring to panic completely, then the prefrontal cortex is going to have a thought. It's going to then signal to the amygdala, we are not safe. And then this is the part of the brain that's going to be responsible for the panic that occurs, okay? But like I said, the prefrontal cortex has some connections with the amygdala. Unfortunately, the amygdala, that small little part of the brain that really looks insignificant but is in charge of so much, has way more power over that prefrontal cortex. Okay, so imagine if I use my hands here because I can't point on the screen at the same time. The prefrontal cortex maybe has a few connections to the rest of the brain and the amygdala, and then the amygdala has like a bunch of connections screaming back at the prefrontal cortex, right? So if that is landing with you and making sense, what that means is we are less likely to think our way into a panic attack versus having the small part of your brain associate panic in any situation whatsoever, and then cause the brain to think a billion different things that just heightens your anxiety. Okay. Does that make sense? Can you let me know in the chat if that was making sense from a science perspective? Because I'm trying to break it down as easily as possible. But what I'm really trying to hammer home is that this small little part of your brain is responsible for panic attacks because they come out of nowhere, seemingly to us, right? Good. I'm seeing it's making sense to some, which is lovely, lovely, lovely. Okay. So now what we need to understand about, I think I can remove this part of the brain. Can we remember this picture just in case? Yes. I'm going to stop share. Is my brain still here? My brain is here. All right. So what we can now talk about is that in panic, what happens is in the moment that we have the panic attack, whatever's happening, is that small little part of our brain starts to make neural pathways. Okay. So let's say you are in the car driving, you have a panic attack. Okay. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this if you've ever had one before. So you're in the car, you're having the panic attack. Now, suddenly your panic attack is related to driving. It might be related to another color of a car that was nearby. It might be related to the sound of a truck. It might be related to the sound of a horn. We might smell pavement. We might feel wind. Okay, so these are all things that are now attaching our senses, and we are now associating, which you were not aware of, that our panic attack has now put out its tentacles, and we have now connections to all these little things, okay? And that is why we start to see panic attacks coming up repeatedly out of nowhere, because we are being triggered by things that are actually not consciously in our awareness. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat, okay? So that means that if you are walking on the street one day and you hear a horn, that you might start to have a panic attack out of nowhere and start to feel all the things that you were feeling in that moment, because our brain is so interesting and made those connections super fast in that exact moment. Okay. Let me know if that landed with you, just so that you can mentalize that. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is panic attacks versus panic disorders, because there might be some of you that have had a panic attack before, and you have a panic attack before and it came out of nowhere. You're like, wow, holy shit, that was crazy. But then it only happens maybe once again in 6 months from now when you're really stressed out about something. Okay. When we start to look at the DSM-5, which is criteria for mental health diagnoses, the panic attack becomes a panic disorder when you start to become anxious about the panic attack happening again. and then starting to avoid different things because of it. So if you are having a panic attack in the car and that happened, and now you're like, okay, I'm never driving again. And every time I get in the car, I have a panic attack. So what's happening is the neural pathways are strengthening, which is a little bit of an issue when it comes to the brain, because that part of the brain is very, very muscular already. So what happens is you get anxious about the panic attack. The panic attacks keep happening. The neural pathways keep firing. It then becomes the path of least resistance. And then every single time you are in the car, you are either worried about having a panic attack or you won't get in a car in general, right? So that's where we're starting to see the disorder come up. And that's where we want to intervene, because having a panic attack in singular origin is like, okay, that was shitty, right? We can all label panic attacks as that was a bad circumstance that happened. However, if they start to happen on a cyclical basis, once a week, twice a week, maybe every day, if it's very bad, maybe there's once a month, whatever it is, we do have to nip this in the bud very quickly, because think of it this way. If a river is going down its path, it's more likely going to go down the path that it's used to, right? It's not just going to veer off and go a different way and be like, oh, I'd like to try this direction today. No, what happens is the panic attacks continue happening and they get stronger in time. And unfortunately, what happens for us is we feel more betrayed by our bodies over time and feel like there's nothing we can possibly do to fix this. How many of you have felt like that? Like you were having your panic attacks all the time and you're like, oh my God, I no longer have control. I don't know what to do about this. And then you're just like, okay, medication's great. Let me know. Okay. So here is another topic I want to cover. And it's something that I always laugh at. I don't know why it's funny. I think it's funny because I've had panic attacks before and I see myself doing it and I'm like, why am I even trying to do this? But when we have a panic attack and we feel it coming on, we're like, okay, I feel myself panicking. I'm going to try and breathe. Oh no, oh no, oh no, what's happening? Right? Because what's happening in your brain is when a panic attack is firing and the amygdala is active and it's getting ready to go and do its thing, it actually shuts down the prefrontal cortex. So everything that makes you a functioning human being is turned off. You're in animal mode. So in order to be out of animal mode, we're going to have to do animal things, and we'll cover that. But that's kind of what's happening inside your brain in that moment. Is it's taking over. And we want to use our prefrontal cortex and go think your way through this. And you can try and convince yourself of all the things. But unfortunately, what's happening is the prefrontal cortex can't signal back to the amygdala. So you can sit there and go, I know this is a panic attack. You should just calm down. You should breathe. Okay, I'm breathing, I'm thinking, I know it's not an emergency. This has happened before. And your prefrontal cortex actually can't communicate that message to the amygdala. And if you're watching the video, when it's recorded and when it's saved, or if you're watching this right now, your amygdala is going like this. Okay, it does not care. It does not want to hear from you. It just wants to go through what it's going through in order to calm your body down. Okay, so the amygdala gets fired in a panic attack. But what it's trying to do is not make things worse. It's trying to signal to the whole body, we got this, we got this, we got this. And like, it feels like you don't got this, but that's what the amygdala is trying to do. It's trying to signal to the body, we're going to take care of this. Don't worry. Your prefrontal cortex is like, I'm worrying though. Thank you. Right? So it's a very complex thing that's happening between these two areas of the brain. And I think that that's where most people get tripped up, is they want to think their way through it or activate their coping mechanisms while they're in it. I would love to hear from some of you guys of what coping mechanisms you use for yourself when you're in a panic attack. I will talk about some things that I have done for myself and things that I suggest to my patients when I'm working with them. But the magic is not in what you're doing during the panic attack. It's going to be what you're doing throughout your day to reduce the occurrence of having panic attacks. Okay? Someone give me a wave right now. I feel like I'm like just vomiting science information on you right now. And I want to make sure that we are all good. Give me like a thumbs up. Give me like a brain explosion emoji, whatever comes to mind. And then I'm going to tackle something that is probably a soft spot for a lot of people. And we are going to talk about, and we won't talk about medication right now because I think that's such a touchy subject, because I think people are so panicked when they're in a panic attack that they will do anything to get outside of it. And if medication becomes the coping mechanism to bring yourself back down, then by all means utilize it as a tool, right? A tool is a tool is a tool. And I always say that I am not anti-medication, but it's not getting down to the root of what's happening here, right? It's kind of like you having a panic attack and then always having a person being like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And you're like, okay, it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, you're the only one inside your body and your brain. So you are going to have to work on those skills in order to, what I call, sit through your shit. Okay. So the touchy subject that I'm going to cover right now is why therapy and traditional therapy, kind of like talk therapy, isn't helpful when it comes to panic. And I think that a lot of people get panic disorder and then they're like, oh my God, I need to see someone because I'm like crazy, right? And the issue that I see with it is that talk therapy, if you remember that picture of the brain, is only accessing the prefrontal cortex, human to human, having a conversation. You can talk about your panic attacks all you want. You can talk about what happens before, you can talk about what happens during, you can talk about what happens after, you can talk about the triggers that are associated with it, but talking about the panic attack and the things about it is not going to stop it from happening. Talk therapy is really helpful for awareness and working with issues that sit in your cortex, but it's not helpful for accessing that animalistic part of your brain, because animals aren't sitting there and talking, being like, hey guys, this is what happened, right? So we have to remember that when it comes to panic, if it does have that primal quality, then we have to tackle it from that side of things. How many of you have tried therapy for your panic attacks? And you were kind of like, okay, I get it. I know it's a panic attack, but it's not something worse. It's, I'm not going to die, and I get it, but it didn't stop the thing from happening. And I think that I think the misinformation is coming from the concept of people not understanding how the brain works and understanding science, like physiology first. And that's like a new motto of mine, physiology first. I always say facts over feelings. And the facts and the physiology matters, because if you are trying to have a solution to a problem, you have to be working smart at how you're tackling the thing that you're trying to work on, right? So when you go to therapy and you're just sitting in there talking about it, you are not getting to the right area of your brain. Right? I'm seeing people come in with the waves. Okay. It's like, hey, me. Yeah, I went to therapy. It didn't work. Okay, cool. And the thing is at the beginning, you want to go to therapy and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to therapy and it's going to help. And then you end up leaving with medication because they're like, okay, like I can help talk to you about it, but like also we need some chemical help. Right. So how many of you walked away from your therapy sessions with medication? And obviously we use them as needed. Most people aren't taking panic disorder medication every day. Some people leave with an SSRI, which is like, okay, if you think it's anxiety I'm working through, then there's other options here. But yeah, I think that that's what I see the most from people is they'll be like, okay, I had a panic attack. Then I felt like I was going crazy. Then I went to a therapist and then I work with them and they realized that I just needed medication. And it's like, no, it's not that you need medication. It's that you're like working in the wrong area. I can't stress this enough. Does it make me annoyed? Maybe. I don't know. I'm seeing some coming through. Yes, lorazepam. Yep. Been given that one before too. Great as a Band-Aid effect. And hopefully, this is going to make sense to some of you, but what is the difference between someone being like, okay, I'm having a panic attack. Here's a lorazepam versus, hey, I'm having a panic attack. Have a beer, have a glass of wine, take 5 shots, smoke a joint. It just, to me, it almost like misses the mark because we're not looking to fix things once we're like in the panic place. It's like, how do we not get there? Because that experience and that feeling was absolute shit, right? Where are my people at? I had a random panic attack happen to me. And obviously we say random always because it happens out of nowhere. I was obviously in a time of very high stress where I was in complete dissociation with what was going on. And a panic attack hit me out of nowhere. And it started from a place of pain. And I lost complete hearing. I lost my sight. It was a out of body experience to which I almost looked at the person I was with and was like, I think we're going to have to call 911. Because you just don't know how it's going to go. Right. So I remember that very, very well. And we're going to talk about the things in the moment that you can do right now, because now my brain has turned to that. But what I did in that moment and what I suggest to people to do in order to get through that kind of stuff, because it can be freaky. I was actually just talking to someone yesterday who was talking about their panic attacks. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a psychedelic trip. Like, it sounds like whatever you did was worse than drugs. So, I mean, it is scary. And we have to be able to sit through that fear and the discomfort. And even though we're reminding ourselves that like, we're okay, it's not just telling yourself that you're okay. You actually have to feel okay with weird things happening to you. And there's ways to train that in. We'll get there. My brain is in so many places today. Am I having a panic attack? Nah. So let's talk about the small things that we can do in the moment. Okay. For me, getting down to the floor is an absolute must. If you are having a panic attack and you're in a public place, I don't care if you are on a chair. I don't care if you're in a crowd, get down. Okay. Not just because grounding, but because when we have things to touch, our hands, our knees, our feet, our back, that is a safer place for our body, right? For those of you that have had panic attacks, and I guess, again, all of you in here have had them. Dizziness is like a really scary thing. You're like, where's the ground? I don't know where the ground is, right? So get down, get your legs up on something. I don't care if you're alone and there's a stranger nearby, get down to the ground and go, hey, do you mind lifting my feet up? Okay. Blood to the brain, primal, we need it. Okay. So getting down, lifting those feet up, letting the blood get back to your brain for whatever reason, because when we have a panic attack, our blood pressure shifts so fast. If any of you have ever felt that happen, where you're like, it almost feels like you're on the drop zone. And I don't know if it's called that where you all live, but I live in Canada and we have Wonderland here and that's what it's called. But it's when you're at the top and you're just like dropped down in like a ginormous vessel and your stomach just goes, zoom. So that is the best thing that I can say is get down to the ground, lift those feet up while you're in a panic attack in the moment. Another thing that I love doing, because we can get this sense of derealization. And I think that symptom has been over talked about in social media and has been overstated for what that actually means. But when we are having panic, the visual distortion is a very real thing. Sound distortion, very real thing. The feeling of air on your body can change. So I like to play with temperatures. So for me, ice cubes in the hand, amazing. Okay. If you are on the ground in your panic attack and there is someone nearby, be like, hello, ice cubes. Thank you. Right. Or if you can bring yourself to, to go to the freezer to grab some ice cubes, then great. Not everyone is incapacitated during a panic attack, right? We're not on the ground like convulsing, but it's like you can put these things in place. If you have the power to think, then you have the power to do. What you don't have the power to do, and I will remind you again, is reason with yourself while you're having a panic attack. You cannot say, oh, this in fact is not happening and I will be okay, right? Your body will kindly look at you and say, ha, fuck you, right? Sorry for my French. So that is what I would say is do the things that you know you can. Get on the floor, feet up, ice in the hands. If you like to do splashing water on the face, go for it. I find it to be less effective because it's more of like texture, temperature, like it's small. Ice cubes in the hand is something constant. And it actually burns. So if you can put yourself in a situation where you can feel something very strongly, then we're going to have a interesting experience in a panic attack. Now, I have heard a lot of people say, I went to therapy and they told me to breathe while I'm having a panic attack. Can you give me a wave if that has happened to you? Yeah. It's almost like someone being like, hey, when you get in the car, put on your seatbelt. No shit, Sherlock, right? And it's like, okay, I'm breathing. Like you're sitting there being like, breathing through it, but it's like not stopping it. Right. And I think that that's something where people lose hope in what the advice that they're given is like, okay, well, I'm breathing and it's still happening. It's like, yeah, it's going to happen. But like breathing is a necessity, the same way that putting your seatbelt in a car is a necessity. We have to do that in order to maintain oxygen to our brain instead of hyperventilating, because the more carbon dioxide that we have in our brain, the more our blood pressure is going to shift and the more anxious we're going to get. Right. So that is something important to think about is, yes, of course, you should breathe while you're in a panic attack. But what I work with people on, especially in my program, is we need to breathe at different parts of the day in order to regulate our nervous system from a long-term perspective instead of waiting until a panic attack happens. Okay. Like good for you that you've breathed now for 30 seconds while you're in your panic attack, but also what are you putting in place during the day in order to regulate your nervous system to the point that your amygdala isn't going to fire for no particular reason. Okay. So how many of you can say in here that you actually have a consistent breathwork practice every single day in order to prevent panic attacks? I want to see some hands if you do. And if you don't, give me another emoji that gives the sound wah, wah, wah. I see one hand up. Carly's like, yeah, I do. I love that. I love that I have one person in here that is actually like, oh, breath work, it's so good in the moment. Good. Maybe I should extrapolate that information. Yeah. And here's something, okay? I hope this lands for so many of you. If breathing is a regular animalistic activity, what better way to access the brain than doing an animalistic activity every single day in intervals in a specific way in order to impact the primal brain structure in the brain that is being affected by panic? Yes. So simplicity here is king, because you're having a disorder and a reaction to your nervous system that is coming from an animalistic place in the body. So do the thing that animals do. Breathe. If my dog was here right now, he would literally be laying down on his back and going, and I'd look at him and be like, what a stressful day you live as a small puppy. But that's something animals do. How many times do you breathe during the day? I'm going to take a breath right now because I'm like amped up about this. Okay. So basically, all in all, what I'm saying is that panic attacks are happening on a consistent basis because we have a dysregulated nervous system. So we have to put the things in place that are going to regulate your nervous system, right? Is that making sense? So obviously we just talked about breath work, which is a very small portion of, how you should be working on it. How many of you have a meditation practice where you are not just sitting and listening to someone say, relax your face? How many of you practice meditation in silence and sit with yourself? This time I want the emoji of like a smiley face. Let me know. If not, send me a wah, wah, wah. Any emoji that you think would fit that sound. Uh-oh. I'm not seeing any smiley faces coming in. Hold on a second. Honestly, Carly, I got to know who you are and we have to talk, because if you're doing all the things and this is still happening, then I want to work with you. So send me a message. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of wah, wah faces come in. Yeah. Okay. And if you've heard me talk before, you know that I have this weird obsession with meditation, not because I'm like some hippy dippy freak, but because the skills that you learn in meditation are so wildly applicable to so many things in your life. So when I practice meditation, and for those of you who are listening who have worked with me and you're listening to this now, and when I post it and you're like, yeah, meditation, Jenna. what I teach is how to sit with your discomfort. I don't want you to sit and learn how to be back tickled by someone else. I want you to learn how to sit through your discomfort and learn the skills that are required to face that. Okay. You don't know discomfort until you've sat in silence. I want to take a break because I see Carly coming through right now saying, I should have put my last name because we did work together. Okay, so Carly did my program. So she's doing breath work and meditation every day. Good, as you should. Thanks for reminding me which Carly you were. Okay. So where was my train of thought a second ago? I was talking about meditation, obviously. Right. We have to sit in silence in order to feel uncomfortable, right? Yeah. So if you've never done that, or if you've sat in silence before and you're like, okay, it's been 5 minutes. Thank you so much. I'm done. And you just leave. That's not sitting in silence. I want to challenge all of you today who are listening to this live. After this, maybe, or whatever you have planned this evening, like it's Friday, let's be real, you're not going out. So sit for 20 minutes in silence. No way out. Put a timer on, close your eyes, and sit in silence. Do nothing. Just sit. Don't focus on anything. Just sit. And all of you who are listening to this right now, I want you to send me a message after, and I want you to tell me what it was like. Okay? Because there is nothing that sitting in silence cannot teach you if you are willing to continue sitting in your silence, which is where the motto "sit with your shit" has come from. Okay? So the reason why I love meditation for panic is because we can actually have a controlled panic attack in a meditation. And it's kind of what I call desensitization therapy when it comes to panic. And I do work with people on that. And when you learn to sit with what's coming up without your amygdala firing and your cortex actually being very active and your thinking brain being there, being like, okay, I'm now feeling this way. And usually that would cause me to feel panic, but I can now simulate the experience and hold it and say, okay, I'm still safe. We're still good. I'm still here. Everything's okay. But now you have some manipulation because your cortex is in fine form and your amygdala is not taking over because you're not having the full-fledged panic attack. You have to learn how to sit with your discomfort in order to battle panic attacks. And that's probably why I do panic attacks really well. They can happen randomly and they can happen. And again, for me, the only time it's happened in the last 5 years was once. And it happened last summer. And it was a time of high stress. So what I'm saying is when you practice the skills to sit with your shit, when you're in chaos, you're still there. And it's not just flying out the window being like, oh, no, panic's taking over. It's like, no, you've actually experienced this same type of discomfort in a different way. And now we're taking that lesson outside of your meditation. Okay. So this is not for me to say, okay, all of you now, you should all start doing a consistent meditation practice in silence and you should all suffer and struggle. No, I don't think that should be done unsupervised. I don't think that it's smart. And I don't think it is going to be effective if you don't have someone to work with to have the proper conversations about what's coming up when you do these things, right? It's the same way that you wouldn't medicate yourself with a medication and be like, I'm just going to try this. I mean, some of you might, but that's just not a smart way of going about things. And sitting in silence can be a very chaotic thing. So I would never say, okay, go do that for however long and let me know what you find. It's like, do it in a controlled environment in a specific way. And let's tackle the things that come up as they come up. So today, my challenge to you, I repeat, is to sit in silence for 20 minutes and see what you find. Okay, just once. And let me know how it goes. I want to know how uncomfortable it is for you because it's uncomfortable for everyone. But what it will teach you is the discomfort is very similar in your silence than it is in a panic attack. You just have to strengthen the muscle of how to sit through your shit. Then you can have a panic attack like I did, laying on the floor, focusing on my breath, being like, this is really shitty. I'm having visual and audio distortions and, there's ringing in my ears and I can't see straight and the floor is moving. And, this could be a medical emergency, but at least I'm sitting there having this conversation equally with my cortex and my amygdala being like, okay, I'm going to wait for you to pass. And I'm going to be okay with how long that you're here without judgment, without fear of what's going to happen next or how long it's going to be like this or when it's going to happen again. None of those fears ever came in because I was experiencing that moment of discomfort and went, okay, it is. It is what it is. Right. So yeah, I'm very interested to hear from some of you after you do this. So we did tools to use inside a panic attack, and then we kind of just covered what needs to be done on the daily. So we do have meditation that is 100% a must for me when I work with people. Breath work, 100% a must. We need to get to those animal parts of your brain. Now, what else is animalistic that us humans do? What do we do? Humans, animals. Anyone want to take a guess? If you've been in my masterclass before, you will know that I talk about this. I talk about what animals do when they're anxious. Come on, someone, give it a try. Yes, we freaking shake. I wish Otis was here. Actually, he never gets scared. But like, imagine a dog in a thunderstorm. You know, they're sitting in the corner and they're trembling, right? That's what animals do. They're not shaking because they're scared. They're scared, so their body makes them shake to release the nervous system. Okay. Interesting thing that animals do. So we can do the same thing. How many of you move your body in a really aggressive, shaking way when you feel a panic attack coming on? Some of you are like, the fuck is this girl saying? I'm actually working on this with one of my patients right now. I will now. How many of you can feel a panic attack coming on? Sometimes I do it without even trying. Yeah, that's because your body is doing what it needs to do. Shaking and trembling is a normal primal response in order for your body to release cortisol and let it actually calm the body back down. So don't stop your shaking. Shake more. Shake more. Shake more. Okay. And I think that when it comes to human beings, we are, we're out or we're in a public space and we're like, I'm not going to shake. That's weird. You know what's weirder? Like having a panic attack, trembling, going down to the ground and blacking out. Like that's weirder, right? Is someone really going to stop you because you're doing this? Or are they just going to think you have like Tourette's or something? Like just do it, right? And if Brittany, you just said, I feel it coming in my hands. Okay. If you feel it trembling in your hands, then start to do this. I did it with one of my patients the other day. We turned off the camera and I'm like, we're going to shake now. And then we literally had a shake it out session, every single limb, every single part of your body, to the point where it became so aggressive that I actually could take the panic, let it happen in a controlled environment, and then it was done. Right? So it's all about the mindset that you're bringing to the table when it comes to having a panic attack. Are you going to let it take over you? Or are you just going to go, all right, we're here now. So let's figure it out. Right? When you go to a dinner party and you're like, I don't want to go. And then you're there. Are you just going to be an asshole the whole time? Or you're going to be like, well, I'm here, so I may as well talk to some people. Right? So why, when it's like happening in our body is like a panic attack, we treat it differently. It's like, you're here now. You better figure it out. Right? Instead of being afraid of what's happening. It's like, yeah, it's scary. But like, so are other things in this world. And you can do this. And in order to get over this, you're going to have to rewire the neural pathways that you have so strongly fired so many times. You may as well start to do it a different way. Doing it the first time is going to be really hard, almost impossible. Doing it the second time, a little bit less hard, still going to be hard. Doing it the third time, same thing. Maybe you get to the fourth time and you're like, I got this. Like, it's a challenge, but I can do it. And eventually what's going to happen over time is your brain is going to just go, okay, I see what you're doing here. You actually don't want me to do that thing, that really crazy thing that we're doing? Okay, we're going to go this direction? Okay. But it has to strengthen those neural pathways before. We can't just go, oh, I wish my panic attacks would stop happening. It's like, okay, do something about it, right? And don't give me the bullshit where you're like, but I can't help it. Like, yes, you can. Yes, you freaking can. I have worked with people without even working with them as my patients. And they're like, hey, Dr. J, I did that thing you said. And like my panic attacks are actually changing. How weird is that? You listened and you did it. Okay, cool. Results, amazing. right? I think that what happens in panic is we really start to lose faith and confidence in our bodies, and we like get resigned to the fate of like, oh my God, this is just the way it is now. No, if you let that happen, they'll keep getting stronger and stronger. And then we're going to need more meds and more meds instead of being like, okay, what's my protocol that I'm putting in place? The one that I'm actually going to do in the moment when the panic attack happens, so that I can create those new neural pathways. And what can I do on a daily basis in order to reset and regulate my nervous system so that that part of my brain, which is freaking out all the time, doesn't feel like it has to do that, right? Because panic attacks are trying to scream at you. They're trying to say, hey, cortex, you're not listening. I'm actually feeling a certain way. And now I'm going to fuck you up because you're not listening, right? Just listen. Okay. Now I'm yelling at you. Did I cover everything? I had one more note here. I wanted to talk about desensitization therapy for panic. And the concept that I really wanted to talk about is how we are going to disconnect the triggers from the panic. Okay. How many of you in here have triggers to your panic attacks? So you know, if I smell that smell, it's going to happen. Or if I see that thing, it's going to happen. If I feel that thing, it's going to happen. Can someone let me know? Is there anybody out there? Do you have triggers? I personally don't have triggers, so I can't speak to it. So if you do have a trigger that is connected to a panic attack, let me know what it is. You don't have to be so specific. It can be like sound, smell, I'll fill in the blanks. But if you feel comfortable sharing, then share it. Because what your job is going to become is how do we create those disconnects between things so that when you smell the thing that you're still like, okay, we're safe, right? And that's where desensitization comes in, where we do controlled work to expose yourself to the connected trigger and then train your body in the moment of that does not equal panic, right? I like to do it with meditation because it's very controlled. We can do visualizations. We can actually recreate the feeling, and you can recreate a feeling in your amygdala inside your brain without it actually being real. Okay. So that's a really good thing for us to know. So we don't have to go be around the bear or be around the tiger. We can think about it and it will still stimulate that part of your brain, and we can activate it and access it and create change. Okay. So we would go into those different points with the triggers and then find how we're going to regulate ourselves and slice that connection between the two things. Okay. It's actually a lot easier than you think. You just have to be willing to do it. People say to me all the time, I'm scared. It's like, yeah, I get it. It's scary. So life is scary. Relationships are scary. I can see Tyler coming in with abandonment issues. He's like, yeah, relationships are scary. Getting in a car is scary. Jumping out of a plane is scary. Some of you, it's like dying is scary. Yeah, all these things are scary. So you're a human. You're not going to do the things? No, because I know that you actually want to get out and live your life. So we're going to have to sit through the discomfort. But before we sit in the discomfort of doing the hard thing, we have to learn the skill of how to actually sit in our discomfort. Does that make sense? I hope so. No, Brittany, fear of death scares me during a panic attack. Yeah, who wants to die? Gosh. Some real dark and twisted people are like, sometimes I do. Not actually though. So what I will do right now is I'll open this up for a Q&A for you to ask me any specific questions because I think that I've ranted for as long as humanly possible about panic. I mean, I could probably keep going, but I'm going to stop for the, goodness of everyone else's earballs. So come through with some questions for me. I'll go through the chat and see if there's anything here. And we can talk about specifics. If you want to use the Q&A box, we can also do that too. Where is the Q&A? There it is. So you can fill it in the Q&A box, or you can fill it in the chat. It is totally up to you. Let me scroll now. I just had a moment where I was like, am I recording this? Yeah, I see it. Panic. Okay, I'm seeing Kimberly at the beginning. Panic attacks over 15 years. Holy shit, girl. What's that like? Can we change that now? I'm going to read what you said here. When I experience a panic attack, I try to remove myself from the current situation, go in the dark and lay down with meditation music and maybe essential oils. Try to see five. Okay, so you're doing grounding techniques. See 5 things, hear 4 things, feel 3 things, process with the senses. Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, it sounds like you're only doing work inside the panic attack. What are you doing day to day? Okay, that is something that I'd want to know, because if you're doing all this stuff and they're still happening, especially after 15 years, I want to know how we can get in there and make change, because that neural pathway for 15 years is firing very strongly. Okay. Does it actually help to work with your senses while in the panic attack though? Grounding is fine. Okay. So I don't know. I always have rogue opinions on this stuff. But I guess that's why you are here to hear me talk, because you guys all know that I have different ways of thinking about this. So, I mean, yeah, you can look at things and hear things and you can be mindful and be present in the moment. But the panic attack's still going to happen. So my preference would never be, okay, how do we work through a panic attack versus how do we come into ourselves in a panic attack, right? And this is not me saying what you've done is bad, because grounding techniques can be helpful for some. But what I do notice, and what I just explained with how our brain connects things to each other, is if we're looking for 5 things, what if one of those 5 things becomes a trigger? If we're looking for sounds, what if a sound becomes a trigger, right? So I think that in panic attacks, we want to throw our arms out and be like, somebody help. And like, we're like doing the techniques and whatever. But if every single time I've ever had a panic attack, if I can bring myself in to my breath and go, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. There's pain, there's discomfort, and I'm here. And if you can coach yourself through the discomfort, which again, you can't just do in a panic attack for the first time out of nowhere, you have to build that skill outside of panic attacks first. But that is what I would always suggest, is come into yourself so that you actually feel confident that you're doing the work, that you're the one holding your hand, that you're the one that's going to pull you out of this, instead of the technique or the thing or something else, or because I held ice cubes, it made it better. It's like, no, you become present and you become the thing that gets you through this. Okay. I want to read what you said in response. I understand what you're saying totally. I've been practicing meditation for a long time, but I'm definitely going to try sitting in silence. Okay. Kimberly, if you've been practicing meditation for a long time now and you have never practiced a silent meditation, I hate to be an asshole, but what the fuck are you doing? Send me a message. I can't wait to chat. We're going to have a good laugh about this one. If you are out there doing guided meditations, it's almost like half-assing it. We're not learning how to sit through our discomfort. We're training ourselves to listen to someone else. We are training ourselves to get our back tickled to go to sleep, or we're training ourselves to someone to saying, you can relax now. It's like, no, this isn't about relaxing. This is about teaching ourselves hard skills to be in our struggle and actually learn to be okay with what that feels like. You can't learn that by someone telling you to relax your jaw and to let your shoulders sink into the ground. And it sure as heck does not happen when you are laying down on the ground. Okay? That is something I am very strict about when I work on meditation with people. We are not laying down and closing our eyes and taking a half nap. This is about struggling and suffering. Why would I let you relax? It's not about relaxing. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you if we get the chance to talk about refining some of those skills. I hope Carly's still listening, being like, yeah, hey, Jenna, make me meditate sitting up. Can you guys hear me when I whisper on this microphone? I hope so. It's for dramatic effect. Is past trauma associated with panic attacks? Yeah, why not? You're actually linking the thing that triggers you before the panic attack happens, right? But panic and trauma are two different things to tackle. Do we tackle them the same way? Maybe. Let's have a conversation about it. Depends what the trauma is. Are suicidal tendencies a common reaction to panic attacks? After the panic attack, you're like, oh my God, I want to kill myself because it was so bad. Yeah. Why not? Panic attacks are probably one of the most mentally strenuous, scary occurrences in the history of time for a human being, right? Imagine you were in like a very traumatic accident and something bad happened. You think that you wouldn't have suicidal tendencies after that if something really bad happened? If you had a near-death experience, right? That's what panic attacks feel like for a human, because for those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long it lasts, you are completely outside of yourself. So I would say, yeah, it's a common reaction. Is it a reaction? Yes. Is it probably the truth? No. Okay. And I only talk about suicide this way because obviously I've had a lot of suicidal ideation. I had it growing up and I've had it as an adult as well. And I've thought about these things very well through. So I would say, yeah, why not? I'd probably have that. I'd probably be like, this is exhausting. I don't want to do this anymore. And especially if they're happening on a consistent basis, right? What a freaking inconvenience. What a stressful experience. So yeah, I get that. Hopefully we get to chat further about that. Kimberly, that's probably why I'm so exhausted after a panic attack. Yeah. That is the most exhausting thing a human can do, is have a panic attack. I used to have a patient who would have panic attacks and then for the next 3 days, but I feel so low. I think there's something wrong with me. I'd be like, you just had a panic attack. Like, what do you mean? That's like going and exerting every single cellular effort in your body, from your heart, from your brain, from your muscles, from literally every organ that you own. Every single mitochondria in your body has bursted at the seams. And you're going to tell me that you have energy to do something later that day, the next week? No. Fatigue, like maximum fatigue. Okay. Do I have any other questions that I have to answer? Oh, I'm seeing another one here. The scariest part of a panic attack is I get a racing heart and I start to hyperventilate and I literally feel like I'm going to suffocate and die. Do I just have to sit with that and breathe, or what can I do? Yeah, of course you have to sit with that. Well, your heart's racing because you're having a panic attack. Heart racing can actually be controlled by breathing. So when I say come into yourself when you're having a panic attack, breath is a part of it. If you're hyperventilating, the more you hyperventilate, the more carbon dioxide is going to your brain, the more your brain is signaling to your body to increase your heart rate to make your breath go faster, right? So physiology is always king. And I know I talked about that already. So you do have to slow your breath down in order to slow the heart rate down. Does temperature help? So when I said ice cubes in the hands, like, yeah, cold always slows the heart rate down. Okay. So remember that. I know there's like something going on TikTok where they put like an ice pack on their chest when their heart's racing. I don't think you need to do that. It's a little bit, it's a little bit extreme, but ice cubes in the hand works. It just brings you into the present moment, which is what we're trying to do. We're always trying to stay present, but with you, not with other things. So we have that there. Okay. Feeling like you're going to die, it's a symptom. You should have that. When you guys all get into a panic attack, you should go, okay, my heart rate's going to go, my blood pressure is going to go, my breath is going to go, I'm going to feel like I'm going to die. Like, that's a standard. Okay. I'm going to hear things differently. Yeah. Standard. I'm going to see things differently. Yep. Standard. Okay. Expect all of these things, expect them to happen. And I don't know who's going to be listening to my lives, but the same way that if you guys are going to get drunk, you have expectations of what's going to happen. If you're going to do drugs, or have an expectation of what's going to happen. Things are going to be different. So you don't panic that the things are different. You go, oh, they're supposed to be this way. Okay. Right. But you can't get to that mindset unless you actually practice sitting with discomfort. So all of these conversations they're good to have, and they're very futuristic in their thinking, because you have to do the hard work first. We can't just go, oh, I'm going to be creative in my next panic attack and I'm going to expect it and think it's going to be better. Like, no, you got to do the work that allows your body and your mind to actually be in that place where it spontaneously starts to see things in that creative way, or that fluid way, or the open-minded way, right? And that is the beauty of practicing mind body work. And I know I have someone in here who's done my program right now. So, she can comment to that. If you want to leave it in the chat, by all means, like, you're not going to have these expectations going into doing these things. You're not going to like start practicing mind body work and doing cognitive therapy and that kind of stuff and go, oh, this is what I'm going to expect on the other side. But when you put your mind to doing something consistently over and over and over again and see what you explore, your whole brain changes, your whole experience of the world around you and how you think and how you feel, it all changes without your consent. So the thing that I always want to hammer home and like, nail into people's heads is that you have to do the work to see the result. We can't just go, oh, this is the result I want to see. It's like, that's nice. I want $5 billion. It's not going to happen unless you actually put in the work to get it. And that analogy is so silly because you guys are like, oh yeah, $5 billion. But it's the same thing for your mental health. If you're not going to put the work in, you're not going to get the thing that you want. So let's stop wishing for the thing that we want without putting in the effort. Or let's stop wishing for $5 billion, but then going to work at a 9-to-5 job, right? Not going to happen. That was savage. Gosh, Dr. J, chill. Okay, let me see what else is happening in here. Do I have any other questions? I'm seeing people respond. Yes, thank you. Okay, I get it. Okay, good. If we do not have any other questions for today, I am going to park it. I am going to leave you. I just spent a whole hour of a lunch break with you. And I hope to speak with some of you soon. You know what I can do is I can actually grab my schedule right now if you want to book a call with me and talk about this, or you can always message me on Facebook. Let me sign in and get you this link. Okay, I think that having a call like this will be helpful because now we're kind of just taking off where we are, right? I don't need to go through the preliminary information with you and go through all this stuff all over again and, give you my personal adage as to why I think that we're going wrong in all these treatments. But we can just take flight from where your head's at right now. And we can have a good conversation about it. So if you do want to do that, click that link. Please fill out your phone number. I cannot even tell you the amount of times that people put in their information and don't give me their phone number, so I can't call them. I find it so odd, but let's do that. And if you want to message me on Facebook, we can do that too. Okay. So I will give you an au revoir. My dog did not make an appearance today. Thank goodness. The last time I went live, he ate 2 shoes, not 1, but 2. So I'm glad that, I can hear him coming down. Let's end this now, right before he attacks me. This has been splendid. I hope you all have a lovely day. And I wish you a panic-free future. And if not, you know where to find me. Peace out, guys.